Hi there, I'm Meena, and today I'm going to talk to you about traveling with a chronic illness. This topic is a special one for me because I love to travel so much, and I really had to work at figuring out how I could keep traveling after I became chronically ill. So in this video, I'm going to briefly give you some background information on my love of travel and journey. And then I'm going to talk about taking a trip with a chronic illness. I'll cover the different things that you need to think about and how you can make it a more successful trip from beginning to end. So I've always enjoyed traveling, but my love of travel was really ignited when my husband and I moved to Germany in 2015. We lived there for a year and we really tried to make the most of it and travel as often as we could to as many places as possible. Travel was kind of our way of life back then. And we still want it to be our way of life, but it's definitely harder to accomplish now that we live in the US and we have a baby and unfortunately a lot of medical expenses. But moving to Germany was a once in a lifetime amazing opportunity. And we were only 2 months into our stay there when I had my first big lupus flare. Although at the time I didn't know that it was a lupus flare. Prior to our move, I had some back pain issues, and I had been diagnosed with early onset osteoarthritis by a doctor in the United States. And, that diagnosis made sense for the most part because, as it turns out, a main symptom of my lupus is lupus arthritis. I had a lot of pain and swelling in my hands and knees. So that was misinterpreted as osteoarthritis at first. But after that first big flare, we started to suspect that there was something more going on. So I saw a rheumatologist in Germany. He diagnosed me with fibromyalgia. I saw a pain specialist who just told me my physical symptoms were a result of my anxiety and my extra weight. And I could do a whole video on what's wrong with that scenario. But anyway, we didn't really know that it was lupus until after we moved back to the USA. And I was diagnosed in 2017, which you can hear a little bit more about in my first Zubia video if you want. So there I was in Germany. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I was having a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue, and at the same time I wanted to travel extensively. And traveling and chronic illness can really be at odds with each other, and it's really frustrating when you don't understand what's wrong with your body. So there were a lot of excruciating days and nights during our trips, but I kept traveling, and then I started connecting with others who had found ways to travel despite having a chronic illness. And I learned how to do it in the best way possible. So let's talk about that. First things first, when you start planning a trip, you have to choose a destination. And you need to choose very wisely. I wouldn't recommend hopping onto a 14-hour flight. That can be very stressful on your body. I wouldn't recommend planning a holiday in a hot location if you suffer from heat intolerance. So obviously, you need to pick a place that suits you and your illness. You may really have to rearrange your bucket list. There may be, an obstacle about a city or a country that's less obvious, so you definitely need to do as much research as possible before your trip. Talk to people that have been there, maybe reach out to locals, whatever you need to do to make sure you're really educated about where you're going to visit. And once you've chosen a location, you need to consider travel insurance. And if you're just going like one state over, you probably don't need to worry about this, although you may want to check the out-of-network coverage on your health insurance. But if you're going further, especially if you're going abroad, then you need to have excellent travel insurance. For most people, needing to visit a hospital while they're traveling is a pretty rare occurrence, but less so for someone with a chronic illness. And you absolutely want to be covered if that happens. Any sort of medical issue while traveling can kind of cause this chain reaction where maybe you miss your flight back home, you need an extra week in a hotel or some special accommodations, and the costs can just pile up. When we lived in Europe, we were covered with our German health insurance policy, so we haven't yet had to purchase separate insurance just for a trip. But a lot of people have recommended World Nomads for travel insurance, and that's who we plan to use in the future. I know several travel bloggers who've had some health issues while abroad and had a very good experience with World Nomads insurance. And if you're planning a lot of trips, you may want to consider purchasing an annual policy instead of getting one separately for each trip. So you know where you're going, You've got to cover your name. Next, you need to make sure you're prepared to take all your medications with you. You'll need enough for your trip, obviously, and some extra in case your return is delayed. Um, you need to know how to travel with your medications. This is especially important if you're flying somewhere. Generally, meds need to be in their original containers, and you can't take an excessive amount. You'll have to really just kind of stick with what you need for the duration of your trip in most cases. If you need to take refrigerated liquids or injections, then you definitely need to check out the proper way to transport those. And you might need a letter from your doctor verifying what you need the medications for. In any case, it can't hurt to have something like that. And make sure you keep your meds with you at all times. Don't put them in a checked baggage; they could be stolen or lost. And you also need to check the rules for your destination. Don't just assume that it's okay to travel somewhere with all of your medications. For example, I take an opioid for pain, but that kind of medication is illegal in some countries, and I could be arrested if I brought it with me. But I definitely have to have it if I'm traveling. So, you may be restricted in where you can go based on what kind of medications you take. Another strategy that I tend to use on trips is pre-medicating. What I mean by that is that I take extra medication in order to prevent a flare-up. So essentially, I'm anticipating that travel will stress my body out, so I'm preemptively treating it. So I might start a round of prednisone on the first day of a trip, or take my pain meds around the clock instead of just as needed, like I usually do. I might add a sleep aid since it can be harder to sleep when you're away from home, and lack of sleep is bad for most chronic illnesses. Basically, I want to ensure that my lupus is as controlled as possible so that I can enjoy my trip and not have to worry about what could happen. At home, I can wait for my symptoms to occur and kind of reactively treat them, but on a trip, I want to play it safe and minimize health issues whenever possible. So let's talk about what kind of activities you're going to plan for your trip. When it comes to an itinerary, I highly recommend under-planning. It's really tempting to want to see everything a place has to offer and squeeze all the main attractions onto your itinerary, but you need to resist the urge because it's most likely just going to lead to exhaustion and disappointment. This has happened to me plenty of times before I kind of came to an acceptance of my new life and my new body now that I have lupus. And, you don't want to be at the end of the trip traveling home in a lot of pain or in distress because you pushed yourself too far. You need to just plan a few things that you are capable of doing, and only plan a few of them each day so that you can work in some designated rest time. And this is going to be easiest to do if you book a hotel or an accommodation, like maybe in the center of the city, so that you can return for an afternoon nap. And that being said, you want to choose your lodging carefully. Like for me, I know that a bath can really help with my knee pain after I've been walking all day, so I look for bathtubs in the room when I'm booking hotels. You may not be able to choose the cheapest option like you used to do, like a hostel or something, but it's definitely going to be worth it to spend a little bit more money. And another thing I like to do, especially if it's a trip that's not very far away, is choose hotels with a free cancellation policy up until the day before, so that if something comes up suddenly, I don't have to go, I can get my money back. And that only works for shorter trips in most cases, but it can be really useful so that you don't have to say, I have to go on this trip no matter what. But talking more about activities for your itinerary, you want to pick some things to do that you really enjoy. And this is important because if you really feel unwell or like you're in pain during the trip, you need to do something that you really love and look forward to despite your pain levels. For example, my husband really loves to visit museums, and I really can't stand them most of the time. And so I'm not going to be happy spending the small amount of energy that I have going to a museum that I don't enjoy. So a lot of times when we're traveling, maybe he'll go by himself to a museum while I'm having my designated rest time, or maybe we'll split up and each do something different that we enjoy. So while he's at a museum, I might go take a walk by the river, and then I get a dose of those happy endorphins that will reinvigorate me and then make the trip better. And you really do need to be careful who you travel with as a person with a chronic illness because you may need a lot more flexibility and compassion from your travel partners. And it's more than just being picky or being selfish. It's knowing that you're not going to be able to do as much and choosing to do things that match your personality and your ability. And ultimately, planning to do things that you really love will help make the trip more successful. And being happy can really have an impact on reducing pain, or at least helping to take your mind off of it for a little bit. And traveling is a time when it's really important to listen to your body. It's particularly important to take in those cues for resting and doing what you need to do. You also need to have a plan for the worst happens. It's never fun to think about, but you'll want to know which hospital you would go to, have all the important emergency numbers on hand. If you have, an episode or a flare, for example, I did in Berlin, my knees kind of gave out when I was trying to walk back to my hotel because I had done too much. And I kind of entered this panic mode and I couldn't focus, I couldn't think clearly. It would have been much easier if I had a plan about what I would do in a situation like that. And lastly, you need to plan for a post-travel rest period. So if you have 14 days for vacation, I'd recommend traveling for 10 and then resting for 4. Traveling is a lot of fun, but it's really hard on your body, and you may not realize that while you're on the trip having fun. Especially if you're switching time zones or climates, having a set rest period will help you recover, especially if you need to go back to working full time. The goal is to avoid a flare up during the trip and after. It's not always achievable, but we can try, right? The rest period, needs to truly be a time for rest. Aside from maybe unpacking, really focus on giving your body time to recover for everything that it did for you during the trip. And over time, you're going to find your own travel techniques that are best suited to you and your illness. So don't be too frustrated if the trip doesn't go the way you wanted. You got to keep trying. It will get easier and more predictable the more you do it, although traveling with a chronic illness is never going to be all that easy or predictable. So thanks so much for watching this video, listening to me talk about my travels and my lupus and the tips that have helped me to travel despite being chronically ill. So I wish you all the best for your own travel. Hope you get to take a trip soon. And that's all I have for today. Thanks. Oh, when I see a few messages, I missed these last time, so I'm going to try to respond. Do you ever travel and pick up prescriptions for wherever you wind up in case you can't bring certain medicine to that state, like opioids? I've never had to do that, and if I can't take opioids to a location, then I'm probably not going to be able to get a prescription for them there. And something like that is generally going to be banned in the whole country. A lot of times I will refill my medications early, and so that I have enough for the whole trip. Most insurance plans will let you refill your meds like on an emergency basis. So like if you only have a prescription for every month, you can refill it 2 weeks early, maybe on an emergency basis. And it may also be a good idea to start getting your prescriptions in a 90-day supply if you can, so that this is less of an issue, because you already are getting a bigger amount of your medication. And the next question is, did you seek support groups when you were first diagnosed for advice? If so, what are the good ones? Well, I don't know which illness you might be suffering from. Since I have lupus, I did seek out a lupus support group through the Lupus Foundation of America. There's one in my city, and it's been amazing for that kind of real life, in-person support. So whatever illness you have, I would maybe search for that specifically. It can be hard to find a good support group because a lot of times it's hard to keep that encouraging and positive attitude when you're talking about something with a chronic illness. But definitely try Googling your illness and your state, looking for something like that. And if you have lupus, I do recommend checking through the Lupus Foundation because there's more moderation available in those groups than you might just find with something set up by a random person. but I do wish you the best of luck in finding a support group. All right, talk to you later. Bye.